agenda is a vote. And although we don't have a ZLC vote, there is this matter of space savers. And the ADCO group, the Alliance of Downtown Civic Associations, having some South End groups that are part of it. You know, those groups have had the whole South End has had a space saver ban in place throughout this winter and the previous winter, and it's, according to the association presidents at least, you know, that might be a skewed view, it's been effective. So some of our other associations thought it would be a good idea to maybe have each of the associations in all the different neighborhoods consider doing this. So I'm going to pull up the language of the resolution that Steve wrote, and I'm going to turn it over to Steve so that you can explain it better than I can. And again, Steve Wintermeyer is an officer in neighborhood Back Bay.
While he's doing that, I'll just give a little bit more background. First, thanks for the introduction, and thanks for having me tonight. My name is Steve Wintermeyer, as Ford said, from the Neighborhood Association of Back Bay. We've been meeting as part of the Alliance of Downtown Civic Organizations for about a year now. Really twofold. One is to share kind of best practices, some of the things that we do, but also to start discussing some of the things that cross neighborhood boundaries. And we realize that we go to the city as kind of small groups individually, and that we might have more influence by talking to people as a group, especially as things that we can agree on and approach the city more as a consolidated downtown group. So that's kind of the twofold purpose of the Downtown Civic Organizations group. At our last meeting, toward the end, we had a gentleman from the South End who brought up the issue of space savers, Mr. Jamie Fox, and they've actually very successfully banned them in South End. It was a little bit, during the heavy snows, I guess some people were starting to permit them again a little bit, and this came up as an issue during the meeting, and when it came up, there was an audible groan from just about everybody in the rooms, because we had all recently been reading about a lot of the vandalism and some of the issues that were going around, the, let's just call it uncivil behavior that surrounded space savers. And we agreed very quickly as a group that it might be a good idea to reach out to our individual organizations with kind of a petition or some type of a resolution saying that we as a larger downtown community do not favor space savers because they really just foster uncivil behavior, and in living in a very congested area, we need people to have delivery spaces, we have handicap spots that get blocked, we have all kinds of reasons that might not affect the rest of the city, but at least for us as downtown residents, it's probably a good idea for us to look at collectively telling the city that we are not really in support of space savers. So we talked about this, and I put together the space saver issue, and one other issue about street cleaning came up, which is kind of related because it all comes down to getting the city to keep the streets clear and clean for the residents of downtown, and we believe that our issues may be a little bit different from a lot of the other areas. So there's really two paragraphs here, and there's 2 points to it, and this will give you a little bit of an idea about the geography of the Downtown Civic Organization. But I'll read off the first part here. It says, "We, the duly authorized representatives of our respective neighborhood associations of the Alliance of Downtown Civic Organizations, request that the City of Boston refuse to recognize parking space savers of any kind for any reason in downtown Boston. And we define this as the area bounded by the Charles River, the Boston Harbor, Four Point Channel, and Massachusetts Avenue, with that little link between Mass Ave and the Four Point Channel, plus the Fenway. Any personal items left on a public way at any time should be treated as abandoned property to be disposed of appropriately by the City of Boston as circumstances and municipal resources permit." You'll see it's written that way specifically to be flexible, so that the city, in an emergency situation like some of the storms we had here, they don't need to be running around collecting space savers. They need to get snow off the roads. So we put it this way so that they could be flexible. Owning and operating a motor vehicle is a privilege. With that privilege comes responsibility, including the obligation to locate storage of the vehicle in a lawful manner, noting that we live in this downtown community and we need to have respect for the rule of law. Within our respective neighborhoods, we acknowledge and request that the city respect the fact that no privilege or responsibility entitles any owner of private property to a claim on public property at any time. So that's the first part of it. It's very specifically doesn't come up with solutions, because one of the things we recognize is that even though we have a lot of common issues living in densely populated areas, the North End is different from the Back Bay. The Back Bay is different from Beacon Hill, which is different from Fenway. There may be different solutions that we ultimately come to how we start to resolve some of these issues in parking and snow clearance in our neighborhoods. But the one thing we thought we could all agree on is that the space saver practice, at least in the downtown neighborhoods, should come to an end. So that was the first part of that. Should I go on to the second part, or do you want to open that up for discussion? The second part was, right that following week, some issues came up with some of the concerns around particularly towing vehicles for street cleaning. And one of the things that people were concerned about is that people were getting towed to other far-flung parts of the city by private contractors. And the private contractors were essentially misbehaving. They were coming in before the street cleaners were, before the hours or after the hours of street cleaning. They were, after the street cleaners had come by, they were towing people, and there was not even application of the rules. And so one of the things that we were asked as a group was also, and I think it goes with this because, again, it goes to keeping the streets clear and clean, was to respect the stricter enforcement of street cleaning and towing in our various neighborhoods. So that's why this is on here as well. And it says, on a related note, it's come to our attention that the city is considering relaxing enforcement of street cleaning regulations. Over the years, significant time and effort has been put into enhancing the enforcement of these regulations by local residents, and the result has been a marked environmental improvement of the downtown districts. While we would be happy to have discussions with appropriate city officials to share solutions about better, fairer, and more efficient implementation of the strategy, we strongly support continued efforts to clear the streets of illegally parked cars during street cleaning hours. These efforts have moved the city forward, significantly improving the environment for residents, guests, and visitors alike, which we have many of in the downtown area. Thank you for your understanding and anticipated support, and we would sign this, at least the groups that do support this would add their signatures to this, and that's why I'm here to talk to you today, is about approving this for participation as part of the Alliance of Downtown Civic Organizations and adding the signature of NEWRA to this document. So with that, I'll turn it back to Ford.
Fantastic. So this is a topic that I'm sure we want to have some discussion about. We would like to bring it to a vote, but after our usual fulsome discussion, we also have to show Steve and our Back Bay friends how well-behaved we are in our discussion. Or not.
It's okay, I've been in these meetings before too. I know how they get.
I was actually hoping we would not be well-behaved. So does anyone have any comment that they want to make, either in support or opposition to the notion of space savers?
Well,
Could you identify yourself first?
yes, of course. Sue Vincennes, I live at 105 Prince Street. I really felt like Mayor Menino took a huge step a few years ago when he said no more than 48 hours for a space saver. And, you know, even that could be questioned. But I think this last winter showed that when Mayor Walsh didn't even adhere to that, in the very least, that he has pandered to this good old boy behavior in a neighborhood that has really disrupted and obstructed the flow of the community. I will give you a good example. There's a building across the street from me who, the one building, one family had 2.5 spots saved for their cars. And since my schedule is somewhat irregular, I'm aware that those spaces in front of my house will turn over 3 to 5 times during a day, in that 8-hour day. And during the winter, those spaces can't turn over at all. And this is also happening in the 2-hour visitor parking spaces. So the neighbors that don't have 9-to-5 jobs that come in and out of the neighborhood every day can't come and go. They can't do their business. And like you were saying, I would imagine it also causes a real decrease in traffic to the local businesses in the neighborhood who are already suffering because of the cold weather. I'll tell you, you know, I won't go to a neighborhood unless I know I can park. But there are many neighborhoods that I would drive to do my business, and the North End, I'm sure, is part of that, you know, suffers from that same problem. But it's unfortunate to see these spots for 8 hours during the day that are held open, and they can't turn over at all.
Mary Lee, Snow Hill Street, and I just, to follow up on what Sue said, I can't speak for other parts of the North End, but where I've lived many years on Snow Hill Street, nobody there ever used space savers. And we've just seen them cropping up in the past couple of years, and it's like this terrible new development. And like Sue said, I mean, it might be 8 hours, it might be longer, and in a neighborhood like this with so few spaces, we don't have the luxury of setting aside a space for somebody who might leave at 8 in the morning and they might not be back till 7 or 8 at night. In the meantime, if anybody has got to have somebody come from the VNA, if anybody's got to have a plumber come, if anybody's got to have any repair work, and believe me, this winter people have had a lot of repair work, where do they go? And then if they take the chance and move that, they don't know what shape their car's going to be in when they come back. I think it's really a problem that the city should have addressed. It's because we've had this, I mean, some people have had these, they had these spaces for a month. It's just nuts.
Other comments? Anyone love space savers and want to say they're the way to go?
No, I just, Dave Rogers, not that. With this, it'd be nice if your organization put something in there to emphasize that the city should do a better job removing snow, because we lose a lot of parking spaces, because if there's no car there, they pile all the snow there. So there's a space that's not used for the whole time of this, until it melts. And nobody gets to use that either, because they do a terrible job removing snow. So,
City space.
well, that exacerbates the problem. Because
And I
there's
agree.
less parking because they don't take the snow away.
And I agree with you, and that actually came up in the development of this document, is that that's probably a phase 2, that we're gonna reach out to, whether it's Ford or another member in here, reach out to the city, not just, people from the Back Bay or just people from the North End, but from other communities, and we're gonna go and sit down and say, talk to the officials about what we can do, but we didn't want to get into some of the specifics like that, because there's suggestions that came up about alternate side of the street parking, and we don't want to, what we're trying to say is we just philosophically are opposed, in this first step, philosophically opposed to space savers, and then move on to some suggestions like that. Whatever ideas we have that'll work for our neighborhood. Like I said in the beginning, what's right for us in the Back Bay, I've never seen a space saver in the Back Bay, but we have, I realize that we're fortunate in that sense that in the Back Bay, speaking of differences, most of our streets are snow emergency streets, so we can't park on the streets during a snowstorm. So we're fortunate that Marlborough Street is crowded, but to this day, Marlborough Street is packed. But I've never seen a space saver on Marlborough Street in my 22 years of living in Boston. So, but to your point, yes, I think that's true, but I think that's phase 2 of what we're going to get to after this.
By the way, we've been joined by several city officials, and one, Nicole, is raising her
So,
hand.
we understand that there were issues with the snow. We had an unprecedented amount of snow this winter, and I heard from the mayor himself that they actually are in the process of developing a system that will work a little bit better than the one we have currently when we do have snowstorms in situations like this.
Also, the Boston City Council will be having a hearing shortly, and I welcome you to come and bring your ideas, because I do have some ideas. I think every neighborhood should have their own snow plan. Because what works in the North End might not work in East Boston and vice versa. So, we'd love to have your ideas.
Are you, Dave Kubiak, Cleveland Place, maybe you said this, are you asking City Hall to actually create a policy, a standing policy, a regulation, or anything like that? And if you're not, then we need to revisit this on December 1st every year.
I think what this is asking for is essentially a policy that they refuse to recognize space savers in the downtown area. So that's, basically Mass Ave East plus the Fenway, where the area is represented by the neighborhoods that are in ADCO. And so, it's not something that can be legislated, I don't think, but it's just that we're not going to have space savers, and if the city, when they deem it appropriate, comes down, whether it's 5 hours after a snow emergency, during a snow emergency, 3 days later, they will come down and pick up those, what it's basically considered rubbish, that there's no recognition of a space saver by the city and the DPW.
And I think the city considers what's going on in South End sort of a beta test of the idea, because it is city sanctioned, the space saver ban in the South End. There are numerous resident associations that are bound together by a forum, and all of them together have joined and said we're going to have this no space saver policy. And again, it's endorsed by the city in that neighborhood, and they seem to think it works very well. I want to reinforce one thing that Steve mentioned, which is, there's a big picture about, winter readiness and how can we handle winters. I mean, I know that many of the people in this room are probably frustrated when you see, 95, 96, that winter, most of us can remember, and actually more snow than this winter, and we didn't have the T closed down. We didn't have one-lane roads all over the city. Now, you can say that all the snow came in February, and that was extraordinary, but it also seems like some things have happened to make us less able to handle winter. And, just a personal observation I'll offer is, when I walk down Commercial Street and I see a space saver 20 feet out from the curb, where someone sort of shoveled off, the lane past the bike path and parked their car in it, and they put a space saver there, that's sort of ballsy. Or actually, I can't use a word, I can't name a restaurant. But it's a brazen thing. I'm going to put a space saver practically in the middle of the street. So, no wonder why in certain neighborhoods, maybe in the North End wasn't as bad as a lot of neighborhoods, but if you go to South Boston, I mean, there's one-lane streets, and some of the outlying streets in the North End also just, if they were two-way streets, they were de facto one-way streets. We don't always have that, and when you have this smushed street, and then you have space saver comes out there, it sort of means that we've sort of lost, the whole system has fallen apart. So this is just saying, hit the reset button. We'll figure it out. Glad to hear from Nicole that the mayor's office is taking it very seriously, coming up with new policy. But this, a lot of us feel maybe we should talk about this being the foundational policy. Get rid of space savers. A lot of other things can fall into place in terms of quicker removal of snow. Any other comments that folks want to make before we take it to a vote?
Quick question: South Boston, that's not mentioned. Is that remaining is that foreign country or something?
No, this group was formed specifically, we were trying to think of how do we define our boundaries, and I can't recall off the top of my head the exact discussions around it, but if you, it's basically everything surrounded by Mass Ave and water is kind of how we came up with it. But then we also realized, being in the Back Bay, we have a lot of interaction with the Fenway, and we realized because of that interaction, we have a lot of similar issues that affect our neighborhoods, and that's going on for years. So we invited the Fenway to come over, especially with some of the development things that's going on over there. If they haven't faced them in the past, they're going to face them in the future. Some of the issues that we have as these really congested downtown neighborhoods. South Boston, it's more triple deckers and smaller buildings. In the traditional, what we think of South Boston, the Seaport is changing that a little bit, but that's why we kind of really focused this downtown group on what we really consider the densely urban populated areas of the city. So South Boston is not part of this group.
Not yet.
Not yet. It could be. We got to walk before we run. Well, so would anyone like to move to make a vote? Some people have told me that I haven't been doing my Robert's Rules of Order as well as I should. So moved. So moved. Is anyone second?
So seconded.
Oh, great. So we will put it to a vote. A circling of the word support means that you're in favor of us attaching a NEWRA signature to this resolution, a letter that would be mailed by the APCO group. And if you don't want NEWRA to join this, then circle opposed. In favor is 25, opposed is 7. So that authorizes us to add the NEWRA name to the letter. So thank you for participating.